Imagine reading a book that described exactly how the systems around you actually work. Not how they are supposed to work, not how people say they work, but how they actually function. The thumbnail shows someone who has. And the advantage it gives him is not the advantage most people think they see. Most people look at that image and read it as strategic cunning. The man who has read a manual the others have not, and knows something they do not about how to manipulate the room. This is a misreading of both the image and the man. Niccolo Machiavelli's advantage was not cruelty. It was not cunning in the sense of deviousness. It was accuracy. He had a more precise model of how human systems actually work than the people operating inside those systems. And the gap between the model most people carry and the model that accurately describes reality is where every version of his advantage lives. The title promises 21 laws. The source material this script is drawn from delivers 21 laws, and all 21 of them are genuine observations. Most of them, when traced back to the actual texts, can be found somewhere in the Prince or the discourses on Livy. But 21 laws is not actually what Machiavelli gave us. What he gave us was one framework, expressed in 21 different observations about 21 different situations in which that framework applies. The framework has 4 chapters, and the chapters are worth understanding in themselves, because the 21 laws make sense as soon as the framework does. And without the framework, they are just a list of things to do that have no coherent basis. By the end of this, you will understand the 4 chapters of Machiavelli's framework, what each one describes, and why it gives the person who holds it a structural advantage over the person who does not. You will also understand what the framework cannot do, which is the part the source material almost never includes, and the part that matters most for how you actually use it. The book in the thumbnail is not a weapons manual, it is a map, and the man reading it is learning how to see clearly. That is the advantage. It always has been. Part 1. The model advantage. Most people are operating in systems they do not have an accurate model of. That gap is the whole game. Every human system, a workplace, a family, a political institution, a friendship, has an official account of how it works and an operational reality that diverges from that account in consistent and predictable ways. The official account describes how things are supposed to work. Merit is rewarded, honesty is valued, loyalty is returned, rules apply equally. The operational reality describes how they actually work. Leverage determines outcomes. Position shapes perception. The stated rules are applied selectively, and the hidden rules are enforced more consistently than the visible ones. Most people operate primarily on the official account. They make decisions based on how things are supposed to work, feel confused when the outcomes do not match the model, and interpret the gap as evidence of unfairness or bad luck, rather than as a structural feature of the system they are in. This is not naivety in the sense of being unintelligent. It is a rational response to an environment that actively promotes the official account, that punishes those who name the operational reality too loudly, and rewards those who perform belief in the official account even when they privately know better. This creates an interesting social equilibrium. The official account is collectively maintained even by people who privately know it is incomplete, because naming the operational reality publicly carries social costs. The result is a world in which the gap between the 2 accounts is simultaneously widely understood in private and almost never discussed in public, which means the people who are most explicit, internally, about the gap have a navigational advantage over people who have not given themselves permission to name it clearly, even to themselves. Machiavelli gave himself that permission, documented it with unusual precision, and then had the temerity to write it down. Machiavelli's innovation was to document the operational reality systematically, to write down, in The Prince and the Discourses, a description of how human political systems actually work that was precise enough to be useful to someone trying to navigate them. He had observed enough of the gap between official account and operational reality across enough different systems and over enough time to be confident that the gap was not accidental, it was structural. And structures can be described, understood, and accounted for in decisions. In chapter 3 of The Prince, writing about how republics manage threats to their stability, he described the Roman approach, problems addressed while they were still small, before the cost of addressing them became prohibitive. The Romans, he argued, never allowed a problem to persist to avoid a conflict, because they understood that conflict deferred merely grows. This is not a counsel of aggression. It is an observation about how structural problems develop over time. And the person who has that observation built into their model will make different decisions at different stages of a problem's development than the person who does not. More precisely, the person who has been taught that problems should be given time and patience to resolve themselves will consistently under-respond in the early stages of a problem's development. The person who understands that small problems left unaddressed tend to compound will consistently respond earlier, with lower costs and with better outcomes. Same situation, different model, radically different decisions. That is the model advantage in its most concrete form. The model advantage is simply this: the person with a more accurate description of how the system they are operating in actually works will, on average, make better predictions about what will happen, better decisions about what to do, and better assessments of what they can and cannot control, not in every case. Fortune, as Machiavelli repeatedly acknowledged, plays a very large role in outcomes. But over time, across many decisions, the accuracy of the model is the most reliable predictor of the quality of the decisions. Part 2. The 4 chapters. 21 observations. 4 chapters. 1 framework. The 21 laws in the source material for this script are genuine Machiavellian observations. Read carefully. Stripped of their performative framing, they reduce to 4 structural principles, 4 chapters of the framework that produce the advantage the thumbnail is showing. The first chapter is information. Who holds information? Who does not? And what each party can do with the difference is a structural feature of every human interaction. The person who knows more about a situation than the person they are dealing with has a navigational advantage that does not depend on any other quality they possess. They can predict more accurately, respond more deliberately, and position themselves relative to what is actually happening rather than what appears to be happening. Machiavelli's observations about revealing only what serves you, about the relationship between mystery and influence, about silence as information management, all of these are applications of this single chapter. The person who is fully legible to everyone has removed this advantage entirely. The person who maintains some control over what is known about them retains it. The second chapter is dependency. Power flows toward whoever provides what cannot easily be obtained elsewhere. This is not a cynical observation, it is a structural one. The surgeon earns more than the administrator not because surgery requires more effort, but because the problem it solves is more urgent, and the alternatives available to someone who needs it are fewer. In The Prince, chapter 6, Machiavelli wrote that all armed prophets have conquered, and all unarmed prophets have been destroyed, meaning the person whose influence depends entirely on goodwill, with no structural basis for anyone to need them, is in the most fragile position possible. The practical application is not to make yourself feared. It is to build genuine capabilities and relationships that are not easily substituted, so that the basis of your position is more durable than persuasion alone. If this kind of thinking is useful to you, the ideas that don't get softened, the ones that actually ask something of you, subscribe to Wise Daily. That's what we're here for. The third chapter is reputation. Your reputation is the story people carry about you before you speak, the set of predictions they have already made about your competence, your reliability, your likely behavior in untested situations. It is assembled from observed behavior across many contexts, weighted heavily toward the moments when you did not know you were being observed, and the moments when the stakes were high enough to reveal character rather than performance. Machiavelli's observations about appearing strong even in difficulty, about the relationship between reputation and leverage, about the danger of a damaged reputation. All of these are applications of this chapter. The practical implication is not to manage your image. It is to behave consistently in private and public, under pressure, and not in high-stakes situations and low-stakes ones, so that the pattern others observe accurately reflects the person you actually are. The fourth chapter is adaptability. In the Discourses on Livy, Book 3, Machiavelli observed that different courses of action are sometimes equally successful because men differ in their abilities, and that the decisive factor is often whether a person's conduct matches what the specific moment requires. The man who is cautious in a situation requiring boldness and bold in a situation requiring caution will fail both times. The man who can read what the situation actually needs and respond to that rather than to his habitual patterns has a structural advantage that is independent of any other quality. This is the chapter that most directly underpins Machiavelli's critique of the official account. The official account prescribes fixed moral rules. The operational reality rewards contextual intelligence, reading the situation accurately, knowing what it actually calls for rather than what your habits or principles prescribe in the abstract, is the most demanding of the four chapters and the one that produces the largest advantage when mastered. Part 3. What the model cannot do. There is something the source material around Machiavelli's 21 laws consistently fails to include: an honest account of what the framework cannot do. And this omission is not innocent. It is what makes the popular version of Machiavellian content simultaneously compelling and harmful. The framework I have described, 4 chapters: information, dependency, reputation, adaptability, is real. It describes genuine structural features of how human systems work. The person who holds this framework has a more accurate model than the person who does not. And that accuracy produces real advantages in navigation, decision-making, and prediction. All of this is true. What the framework cannot do is guarantee outcomes. Machiavelli was absolutely clear about this, more clear than most of the popular content that claims to be based on his work. Chapter 25 of The Prince contains his most sustained treatment of fortune, the role of luck, circumstance, and timing in human affairs. He estimated that fortune controls roughly half of what happens. The framework improves your odds. It does not control the half that fortune governs. Let me say this directly, because the source material I am rewriting presents these laws as weapons that make you undefeatable. I have watched people absorb Machiavellian frameworks of exactly this kind and use them to become more strategically sophisticated and more isolated, more suspicious, and more exhausted simultaneously. The framework applied without limits produces a kind of hyper-vigilant strategic orientation that is genuinely unsustainable as a way of living. Every relationship becomes a dependency calculation. Every disclosure becomes an information management decision. Every interaction becomes a reputation management exercise. And the cumulative effect is a life that is well navigated and deeply thin. Machiavelli himself was not this person. He had a rich correspondence, genuine friendships, a family he loved, and a quality of intellectual engagement with the world that is evident throughout his letters as warmth rather than calculation. He was able to hold the framework as a framework, a tool for understanding specific features of specific situations, without it becoming the primary lens through which he experienced everything. The popular Machiavellian content takes the tool and makes it the whole person. That is a misreading of both the man and the material. The person who holds the framework without limits has an accurate model of the systems they are in, and a diminishing capacity to actually inhabit those systems. The person who holds the framework with limits, who applies it in the context where it is useful, and releases it in the context where connection, trust, and genuine openness are what the situation requires, has the strategic advantage and the life. The person who does not hold the framework at all is navigating with a map that does not match the territory, and will continue to be confused by the gap between the official account and what actually happens. Only the second of these three is actually what the thumbnail is showing. The man reading the book will set it down. He will close it, put it aside, and go and have a life. The reading is in service of the living, not a replacement for it. And the popular Machiavellian content, with its 21 laws and its tribal affirmations and its promise of becoming untouchable, consistently implies that the reading is the point. It is not. The framework is a tool. Tools have appropriate and inappropriate applications. The appropriate application is the development of a more accurate model of how the systems you are in actually work, so that your decisions are better calibrated to what is actually happening. The inappropriate application is the treatment of every human relationship as a system to be navigated rather than a connection to be inhabited. The first leaves you wiser. The second leaves you very alone with a very accurate map of a territory you have stopped genuinely entering. Part 4. The Reader. The man in the thumbnail is seated. He has chosen to read something carefully, rather than to perform for the witnesses behind him. The shadowed figures can see what he is doing, but they cannot read the pages. The book is oriented toward him, not toward them. He is absorbing something for himself, not displaying it for anyone else. This is the correct posture for everything that Machiavelli actually gave us. The framework is for private use. It is for the internal model, the set of accurate descriptions of how things work that allows you to make better decisions when decisions are required. It is not for public display. The person who announces their Machiavellian intelligence, who talks about reading people, seeing through games, understanding leverage, has made themselves immediately legible in exactly the way the framework warns against. The framework performed publicly destroys itself. Machiavelli understood this because he practiced it. The Prince was not published during his lifetime. The discourses circulated privately. The insights were shared in correspondence, in small gatherings, in the specific relationships of trust that he had built over decades. He did not broadcast the framework. He used it in the specific contexts where its accuracy was useful, and kept it private otherwise. The 21 laws are a reading list, not an operating manual. Read through them slowly. Each one is a lens, a way of seeing a specific feature of a specific kind of situation more clearly. The law about reputation is useful when you are making a decision about how to behave in a high visibility situation. The law about dependency is useful when you are assessing your own position in a relationship or system. The law about information is useful when you are deciding what to disclose and to whom. The law about adaptability is useful when you are asking whether your habitual response to a type of situation is actually what this specific instance requires. Used as lenses, held lightly, Applied where they illuminate and set aside where they distort, they produce the specific quality the thumbnail is showing. A person who has read something useful and is absorbing it for private application. Not a weapon, not a manifesto. A map. The book in the thumbnail is not a weapons manual, it is a map. And the man reading it is not planning how to defeat anyone. He is learning how to see clearly. That is the advantage. It always has been. The 21 laws, the ones you just read in the source material, the ones that have been compressed into 4 here, are observations about how human systems work. They are not instructions for becoming ruthless or untouchable or feared. They are descriptions of structural features of social environments that most people navigate without ever having named. And naming them clearly and accurately is what allows you to account for them in your decisions, rather than being surprised by them. The book in the thumbnail is not a weapons manual. It is a map, and the man reading it is not planning how to defeat anyone. He is learning how to see clearly. That is the advantage. It always has been. What is the specific gap between the official account of a system you are operating in right now and how it actually works? If that question landed, type "I read the room" in the comments, not for me, but for you. And if this video gave you something real, please like it, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Wise Daily. Every video on this channel is built to give you one thing: the philosophical tools to live with more power, more clarity, and more intention. We'll see you in the next one. Machiavelli gave us the external map, the 4 chapters of a framework for reading how human systems actually work. But there is a philosopher who spent his entire life working on the internal version of the same problem: how to see yourself clearly, how to navigate your own patterns without being governed by them, and how to remain genuinely useful to the people around you while holding an accurate model of what they are and are not capable of. That philosopher is Marcus Aurelius, and the meditations are the subject of our next video.